Would you comment on the geographic disparity of awardees and why, in your opinion, some areas of the country are getting more SBIR grants than some others?
Yes, thank you. Some of it is inherent to the population centers. More demographically large states are going to receive more awards than some of the other states. But there is also, at least in my experience, there is as one moves away from Washington and certain research centers around the country, one doesn't think of the federal government as the source of funding for this type of work, or they don't think of it as a friend, actually, in the most part. So, and this is particularly the case and is reported to me by folks in like New Mexico, even though they have the large federal labs. They'll say companies just don't even think of applying for it. In the other situations, there isn't the infrastructure necessarily there to support an environment that encourages entrepreneurship, and that's why states are making an investment to try to encourage that kind of thinking, that kind of risk-taking, and that's where SBIR and outreach and assistance efforts can be helpful.
Okay. Thank you very much. And finally, Dr. Matthews, what role does the SBIR program have in Cincinnati Creates Companies, that project, and any other programs or projects that you'd like to mention?
Thank you. I'm first of all, I'm very impressed by the testimony and the wide range of issues that have been brought up here, because I'm more at the early. Did I get 6 in there? Early stage. I live in the ideation conceptualization world more than a lot, but I completely support what Mr. Heeson's saying in terms of venture capital-backed ventures. And that's where Cincinnati Creates Companies came into place, because we identified this gap that exists at that early stage, very early stage, where we have individuals who are extremely interested in moving forward science and technology, but just don't know how to do it, don't know what to do or how to go about it. Excuse me. So we conceived Cincinnati Creates Companies around that very notion. It's a 3-part program. The first part's a very rigorous 10-week educational program. We put them through their paces. It's a kind of an advanced boot camp, if you will, over 10 weeks. A 15-week structured mentor relationships. We actually have a mentor come in and work with them, oftentimes from the angel or VC community that on a volunteer basis. Then we have a competition, because nothing motivates people like getting together and trying to compete against each other in these situations, because that's what they're going to be doing from that point forward. And so they compete, and they get some funding from that, some what I call trouble money, because it's not enough to really do anything with, but get them in trouble. But that's a good thing, because that really propels them forward. SBIR becomes a critical component of that as they move through that process, as they become aware of it, especially, as I mentioned, for some of our life science companies that are at the BioStart incubator. This has been particularly critical for them. And some have been very successful at moving from the bench forward, which again, I apologize, I think it was Mr. Heeson or Mr. Greenwood said that people aren't rushing to fund a lot of these things at that early stage. So SBIR is critical. SBIR is critical at that point to make that happen. And I certainly saw that with Cincinnati Creates Companies. Now, we had NSF funding for that program over 3 years. We had a 1-year extension. We put 4 cohorts through that program. We're trying to keep it going at Cincy Tech. Cincy Tech now is trying to use some of their Third Frontier money in Ohio to keep that program alive and moving forward. So I would very much like to see SBIR play a key role in that. And I keep in touch with the 47 graduates of the program very extensively, and just was in conversation with one, Dr. George Weber, who's working on a molecule for cancer. That's a very, very good example. And I see him as prime to get an SBIR grant to move his process forward. He just competed very successfully at the Purdue Life Sciences business plan competition. So yes, critical, just very critical.
Would the gentleman
I'd be happy to yield.
Yes, Dr. Matthews, we created a program for phase 1 and 2 primer that will provide technical assistance for phase 1, and then on phase 2 for those PhD researchers that have something really good, but they don't have the skills in terms of how to run a company. So you will be supportive of that part of it?
Absolutely. Again, in the academic world, you have professors who are very adroit and adept at the science side, and you have those that are very adroit and adept at the business side, but they rarely exist in the same space. So getting those folks together or getting one trained on the other side is critical. A great case in point, in my graduate MBA class, I often have engineering students. 4 or 5 years ago, I had an engineering student show up in my spring quarter class. He's an engineer, through and through. Business was not in his vocabulary. But he was a co-patent holder on some MEMS-based technology that was very promising in the liquid cooling side of the house for electronic applications. He went through my regular MBA program. He graduated and actually applied to and was part of our Cincinnati Creates Companies program. And he has moved that program forward tremendously at this point. Now, he is being incubated out at the Siemens Business to Technology Park in San Francisco. He'll probably be applying for an SBIR in the not-too-distant future. I'd be a little concerned that now he's gotten a little bit of backing that he would be excluded from that. But, without that training, he would not be in the position that he's in now.
Well, yeah, Mr. Greenwood?
There's a point that I failed to make in response to Mr. Chabot's question, which is why our industry is so particularly reliant upon venture capital. If you are a small business and you make widgets, it's not a very long period of time until you can start selling your widgets. And then you derive revenues from those sales, and you can become completely self-sufficient. In the biotechnology world, once you get a patent for your molecule, let's say, you have a 10 to 12 to 15-year long period for you to develop that to the point where you can test it in animals and then do phase 1 clinical trials in humans and phase 2 and phase 3 and take it to the FDA. And all of that period, throughout all of that time, and by the time you get to the FDA, you've spent hundreds of millions of dollars. You have to raise all of that money usually without a penny of revenue from sales. And you can't get there without at some point becoming more than 50% owned by venture capital. There's just no other way to do it. And that is why this rule is so nonsensical.
Thank you.